Welcome to Popternative, where we dive into topical discussions from the worlds of pop culture, social media, and sports. Here is your host, Peter Remoliotis, a.k.a. PD Beats.
Hello and welcome to the Popternative podcast. This is the podcast where we have digital discussions to the worlds of social media, sports, pop culture, everything really. We're in NHL draft mode. The 2018 NHL Entry Draft kicks off June 22nd in Dallas, Texas. Many players are anxious to see if their names will be called on the Friday or the Saturday. And this is our official NHL Draft preview show with TSN's Director of Scouting and a good friend of the show, Craig Button. Craig, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, my pleasure, Peter. Yeah, it's just a few days away now when players can go to the draft and hear their names called and get the jersey to put over their suits, their nicely tailored suits, and big smiles. I know that.
Absolutely. So you've been doing a lot of interviews. There's been a lot of your TSN draft list. So we're gonna try to get into as much as we can, but we're the obvious stuff. Who's going 1 and 2. I think we can kind of leave that on the side. But I just wanted your opinion on what are some of the big headlines or characteristics of this year's draft class in terms of things that have been standing out in the media or talking to teams. What is is there like a definition? Is it about defense? Is it about forwards? What are some of the headlines for the 2018 NHL Entry Draft?
Every draft has its own unique, separate and individual DNA. So, you got to go into any particular draft, and you can't sit down and say, oh, this draft doesn't have this, or this draft doesn't have that, or this draft has that. You look at a draft and you say, okay, this is the player pool for this coming draft. And you go through and do the work, and you do the evaluations and the assessments and the projections and everything that goes with it. And, drafts get so much of the time defined by the top part of a draft. So when Connor McDavid comes along, it's a generational talent. When Austin Matthews comes along, it's a young player from a hockey desert, Scottsdale, Arizona. And this year's draft has a number one elite defenseman in it, Rasmus Dahlin. So we tend to put a label on the draft depending on what's there right at the top. But I can guarantee you, Peter, that this draft will have a lot of good defensemen selected. They'll have a lot of good centermen drafted, a lot of good wingers drafted, and a few goalies drafted. They'll all find their way to the NHL, and they'll come from different parts of the draft. So I just think that you have to look at it for what this draft class is, what the players are, and what's available, and then move from there.
Absolutely. Like I said at the beginning, the top 1 and 2 with Rasmus Dahlin and Svechnikov, that seems to be the consensus 1 and 2 from what a lot of people are saying. The top 5, though, and people that follow your lists throughout the year, the top 5 has changed a little bit. Do you still see it as the top 5 that you envisioned in the last couple of months, or is it changed completely?
I'm going to give you I'm going to give you a quote, and it might not really apply here, but Muhammad Ali, upon turning 50 years of age, was asked, are you the same person that you were today that you were at 20? And he said, if I'm the same person at 50 that I was at 20, I've wasted 30 years of my life. So when you start out evaluating players for a draft and you start looking at it, if my list looked exactly the same in June as it did in September, then something's really gone wrong. And what would have gone wrong was that would have meant that I wasn't out watching the players. I wasn't putting in the work. And those lists change daily in some cases. The day you do a list, you start to go, oh, did I have that guy too high? Did I have that guy too low? And you're always assessing. Talent assessment for a draft and post-draft is never static. Yeah, it's a snapshot in time when we see the draft, but there's a lot that's going to continue to be evaluated over the next 5-6 years for these players. So you got to look at it and you got to understand that things are going to change. And people ask me all the time, Peter, oh, why is so-and-so fallen? Why doesn't anybody ever say, geez, that player's really emerged. That player's really progressed. That player's really developed. Ty Dellandrea comes to mind. playing in a terrible situation in Flint and nobody to play with. They trade most of their team in the new year, early in the new year. Now he has even less players to play with. All he did was get better over the course of the season. That's one example. So when I look at the top five, after Dahlin and after Svechnikov, I think there's not much difference, if any, between the next 8-9 players. I think if you want a centerman, you can choose between Jesperi Kotkaniemi or Barrett Hayton. You want some wingers? Well, you can take Philip Zadina or Brady Tkachuk. They're different types of wingers, but they're wingers that are top-line guys, in my view, once you get to the NHL. You want defensemen? Well, you can take Quinn Hughes or Noah Dobson or Evan Bouchard or Adam Boqvist. You want a goal scorer? Take Oliver Wahlstrom. So this idea that the third player is clearly better than the ninth player doesn't exist in my mind. And I'd love to tell you who I think is going to be the best player. I get them into groups, and I just say this is a smorgasbord of talent. And the smorgasbord of talent affords teams that opportunity to say, hey, listen, we really want a center, or we want this type of defenseman, or we want this type of winger, and you go from there.
As a former GM in the NHL, I wanted to know, I guess the answer might be, it depends on the team, depends on the situation. But are you drafting, especially maybe in the first round, I'm curious, are you drafting for the need on your club, or are you drafting the best available player out there? So, for example,
never drafting for need. Any team that drafts for need with a 17-year-old draft is absolutely mismanaging the draft process. Now, you can look at a group of players and you can say, geez, you know what? We could use a defenseman in our prospect pool. We think it's close enough between this player and that player that you take the defenseman. But that's not need. The NHL draft is exactly like the Major League Baseball draft. You're drafting 17 and 18-year-olds. The vast majority of them are 4 or 5 years away from being able to contribute to any meaningful extent in the National Hockey League. That being said, so evaluate the players, understand what they bring, understand what their developmental requirements are. And most importantly, what I always emphasize, and I think it's so key, take the guys you want. Who cares what any outside noise says? Take the guys you want, celebrate it, and move on.
So with that said, who are some of the players, with that said, players that are maybe not ranked as high, that might be a high riser in the draft based on what you see? I mean, we know when you think about Jesperi Kotkaniemi, about the Montreal Canadiens, you think that he might be a good fit because he is essentially the best center of the draft. Are there other players that you see, because of the needs and where they are, that the players that might not be seen as, a top 20 guy might go in the top 20 because there's a team that really needs that?
I'll get to Kotkaniemi in a second. Mm-hmm. Really, my answer to that is ask me in 3 years who the guys are that are further down the draft that end up being emerging. Like, if I thought there was a player that I thought was a top 10 player or a top 15 player that isn't in my top 10 or 15, then shame on me. The guys that I think today are the top 15, 20 players, they're on my list. Now, could somebody make an argument that the 26th guy should be in the top 20? Sure you can. It's not so clear. It's never clear cut like that. But, you look at players that are outside the top group. And when I talk about the top group, I'm talking about the top 25, 40 guys. So time will tell. There's players that need a little bit more time. There's players that need a lot more time to develop. And that has to take its due course. Now, as for Kotkaniemi, I'm going to take you back to the 2005 draft. Sidney Crosby went first overall. Carey Price went 5th overall, and everybody was up in arms that the Montreal Canadiens were taking Carey Price 5th overall. Everybody. How can they be taking Carey Price? They have Jose Theodore. Why would they take the goalie? Well, they took him because they thought he was a top player. People can say they didn't need him. What do you mean they didn't need him? At some point in time, you need good players. There's never a team anywhere on the planet that's going to say, we don't need good players regardless of position. So they got their player. And who cares what anybody else thinks? Further to that draft, the 11th pick in that draft was Andrej Kopitar from Slovenia. And, after Crosby, and keep Crosby out of this, Andrej Kopitar has no equal from the 2005 draft in terms of performance and star power and everything he's become. So if he would have gone second in that draft, everybody would have gone, how do they take Andrej Kopitar second? Would have been a pretty good pick, right? I can only tell you this. Just put out the noise. Forget about what anybody else says. It's about your team. And I can guarantee you this, Peter, the vast majority of people don't know the player pool, and what they do know, they know very little about it.
Oh, fair enough. You mentioned like every year, you have to let players develop, but every year you see players like Nico Hischier that get drafted, end up going in the NHL the first year. Are there any NHL ready players or closer than others in your eyes or in your books for this NHL draft? I mean, I look at some big players like an Evan Bouchard, a big defenseman. Are there guys like that you could see maybe having a chance? They have a good camp. The Philip Zadinas, those guys. Could they have an opportunity to crack a lineup?
Yeah, they could. And I mean, you just start at the top. I mean, Rasmus Dahlin, he's going to be in the NHL. Andrei Svechnikov in the NHL. I think Philip Zadina, no question, can be in the NHL next year. And you go and look at their progression. Look at what they've done at the levels below the NHL. They've excelled. They've been dominant players. And so I think that's a real big key for players to be able to, before you move on to the next level, have you mastered the level below? Have you excelled at the level below? The three guys I just named absolutely have. Could Brady Tkachuk be closer to playing than not? Yeah, I think he'd benefit significantly by playing another year at Boston University. Is Evan Bouchard closer to playing than not? Perhaps, but he hasn't played in the World Junior Tournament. I think that would be a really good step for him to just take another year to challenge yourself at the highest levels amongst your age group. And, Oliver Wahlstrom, who plays with the National Team Development Program in Plymouth, Michigan, I think that physically he is a player that is closer to playing than not. But I don't think he's ready to play next year. So when I start to look down the list and I start to see the players, really, Peter, I come up with three players that I think, certainly could play in the National Hockey League next year. I don't see anybody else that's really indicated to me that they're ready to meet that challenge.
Absolutely. From talking to you as well, I know that, you say that the NHL still loves their size, but we've talked about many players in
I
the
don't
past.
say that. Do I?
Well, you've told me that.
I got to jump in here because what I've said is the vast majority of mistakes in the draft are on size. Teams overestimating the big player and underestimating the small player.
I guess that's kind of what I'm saying, though, is that you say that's what I was kind of going to say, right? They're going to look at players that have the size and automatically they're going to assume that they're more NHL ready. But you've said in the past that has nothing to do with it, correct?
Listen, I just think get the best players. And if you're looking at a player that's coming into your team that you think can play because he's bigger rather than a smaller player that might be more talented, again, you're making big mistakes.
Mm-hmm. But
Alex DeBrincat. How about Alex DeBrincat? Like the fact that he went in the second round, it's a joke. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a kid that scored 50 goals, had 28 in his first NHL season, second round pick. It's a joke.
No, absolutely. Because I'm thinking of players like Aiden Dudas.
He's 3 or 4 years away from being able to play in the NHL.
But I'm thinking
he's a good player.
He's a smaller player, right? Like he's small. And you look at the 2019 draft, you look at someone that you're a big fan of, Cole Caulfield.
Yeah, I am a big fan of Cole.
These are like elite players. No, I know where you stand, so we'll move on with
I don't look at size. You know what? What I look at, can the guy play? Cole Caulfield's an elite goal scorer. Mm-hmm. Aiden Dudas is a very smart player, plays the game a lot like Brendan Gallagher does. So let's go redo the draft when Brendan Gallagher was selected. He's a first-round pick. There's no question about it. But, he was 5'10". I say it all the time. If you want to scout with a tape measure, go ahead. I'd suggest you're better off working at Home Depot measuring lumber.
No, for sure. I understand that. Okay, a couple of quick things I want to also go over. I want to maybe go through a quick I want you to maybe go through a little tour of the Canadian teams and what you kind of think are kind of the right tools and right moves for this draft. So we can, if you can kind of go ahead and start. What do you think some of the teams should do, especially with their first round picks?
So where are we starting with Montreal?
Sure.
Well, they're picking 3, and to me, I've been pretty clear. Like, Kotkaniemi is an excellent centerman. They don't have centerman. You don't draft centerman. I don't know how you're going to get them. They just trade for Max Domi. So let's look at the left side. They have Max Domi. They have Max Pacioretty. On the right side, I think Drouin's a winger, and now they have Brendan Gallagher. Oh, yeah, nobody in the middle of the ice. No centerman. How are you going to get them? Nobody's ready to give them away. Nobody's ready to say to you, here's our centerman. Here, you have them because you don't have one. So how do you go get one? You go and draft one. This kid's a really good player. Barrett Hayton's every bit as good in my view. Barrett Hayton, in terms of potential and skill, reminds me of Patrice Bergeron. Not that he's going to be Patrice Bergeron, but that style of player. If you don't draft centermen, teams don't just give them to you. Ottawa at 4. I tend to think that maybe Philip Zadina might be a good fit here. I think we talked about it earlier. He's going to play next year in the NHL, in my opinion. So Ottawa, depending on what they're going to do with some of their off-season moves, who they trade, who they keep, certainly skill and offensive play is something they could certainly use. And, if you're looking at Zadina, certainly that's a player that seems to come to mind that could fit there. You go to the Vancouver Canucks. They have some terrific forwards. I think a defenseman really fits what could really, add another player that's important to having success. They got really good forwards. We know they drafted Elias Pettersson last year, an elite player. They traded for Jonathan Dahlin, a very good player. They got players coming at different positions. We know about Besser, Horvat, Demko's a real good. The blue line, to me, is where they could really look. And I think they're going to have some choices there, whether it be Bouchard or Hughes or Dobson or Boqvist. I think there's real options there. You go to Edmonton at 10. Edmonton's like the Montreal Canadiens. You know how you get a right shot defenseman? You trade Taylor Hall. Well, guess what? There's a massive talent discrepancy between Taylor Hall and Adam Larson. But that's the price you got to pay if you haven't drafted defensemen. And while the Edmonton Oilers recognize that, if they wanted to be a better team, they needed some better defensemen. I mean, that's a massive price to pay. They have centermen. So to me, there's going to be defensemen there for them. They might look at a scoring winger because, quite frankly, Peter, if you look at the Edmonton Oilers lineup, and the only 3 proven forwards they have are McDavid, Draisaitl, and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. And I'm talking about proven that okay, these guys are going to produce that much offense. Obviously, Milan Lucic is an uncertainty. Puljujarvi's still trying to find his way. So you can never have enough goal scoring. So I think that that's really, really key for them. Toronto Maple Leafs in the last part of the first round. I mean, Ottawa picking in the 20s. They have Pittsburgh's pick. I think that's a case where you just look, who's the player we have rated high on our list that we want? That's where you go. For me to say they should take a center, or a defenseman, or a goalie, or whatever, I don't know. I just know that I think that the draft affords them a lot of opportunities, both Ottawa and the Toronto Maple Leafs, to consider many players. But as I said earlier, take the guy you want. Take the guy you really like, that you think has real potential. There's no problem, whatever position he plays.
Absolutely.
And we know that Winnipeg and Calgary don't have first round picks.
Do you have maybe ideas?
I have no idea what Winnipeg or Calgary doesn't pick until like 105. Like, really? All I know is there'll be 104 names off the board. Winnipeg, same thing. All I know this about Winnipeg: they do an excellent job of drafting. They've mined a lot of good players out of different parts of the draft, as have the Calgary Flames. I mean, Johnny Gaudreau was a 4th round draft pick. TJ Brody was drafted later on. Michael Furlan was drafted later on. So you're looking at players that they've had a lot of success with in drafting, and Winnipeg isn't much different. So, there's no question in my view that both those teams will select players that are further away, but will eventually have an opportunity to be on their teams.
Absolutely. We'll wrap up. Before we wrap up, what is some of the advice that you have for a lot of these players that might or might not get their name called on June 22nd or June 23rd?
Yeah, I mean, you got to keep in mind it's disappointing, especially expecting to be drafted and wanting to be drafted, which is what the kids desire. But at the same time, Peter, you know what? It's a day in the life, I call it. It's a snapshot of that particular day. You look at different players that don't get drafted. They go to NHL development camps. They go to NHL training camps, and they get signed. And so, you know what? It's just it's one day that, while disappointing, it's just about, hey, keep playing, keep doing the things you're really good at. And while nobody may have recognized you that day for having NHL potential, if you keep doing the things that you're good at, teams will notice. And that's what you got to keep in mind. Again, the disappointment is real. It's right there. It's right on the surface of your skin. So it's really hard to just kind of say, oh, don't worry about it, because it is disappointing. But at the same time, I call it a day in the life, and don't let it define you.
Great. Well, TSN's Director of Scouting, Craig Button, back with us for the NHL preview show. Craig, thank you so much for coming on. I mean, I think we're getting close. We've 4 or 5 times. I mean, we got to get you a jacket soon.
Well, I'm expecting that, or a coffee cup.
Yeah. Well, we can do
so
the
I can
coffee
put up
cup.
my coffee cup, and I can just kind of, product placement, right?
We could do that.
Brand placement.
Well, seriously, Craig, everyone's looking forward to watching the draft. I know you are. I am as well. It's going to be great. Thank you for coming and talking about this. And, hey, next time maybe you'll have a cup for the 2019 World Juniors preview show.
I fully expect it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig.
Thank you, Peter.
No problem. This has been Popternative, youtube.com/Popternative for the video episodes, iTunes, Spotify for the audio. We have a lot of exclusive NHL 2018 prospect interviews to check out. But until next time, this is Craig Button and PD Beats signing off.
Thank you for tuning in to Popternative. Make sure to check out our past episodes of Popternative on YouTube. Be sure to like Popternative on Facebook and follow us on Twitter.
This has been an Autograph Communications production.